Welcome to POW, Pearls of Wisdom, conversations with, well, you know, people just like me and you. Today is all about TV, film, drama, and the Hollywood glamour that is Patrick Jack. Ta-da! So we're now at his studio, so let's come in and have a look.
Come
with
on
me.
in.
This is a fantastic studio space he's got here and an amazing collection of pieces. So let's go and have a look. What's that you're titivating with?
Well, it's very dusty, you see. I have a dusty gimp mask on camera.
No,
There it is, that's a bit better.
that's a little unnerving.
I know. But the thing is, it haunts this studio. That's why it's up there, because when I hid it away in a drawer, it would lurk its way out. You find it place, it's haunted. There's someone living in that mask.
What's all this?
Well, this is kind of jumpsuit corner. So you've got jumpsuits in every colour, shade and size.
You have. It's like rainbow.
Yes, these were all custom dyed for a job a couple of years ago that we've kept in stock because you never know when you might need a multicoloured jumpsuit. Then we've got tulle corner. This is really cool actually. This is a two-piece. It was custom made for a drag queen in a Nivea commercial by a company called It's So Maisie, and she only works with tulle. Oh, this is fun. So this is really old from a sketch show many years ago, but it's a muscle suit. So basically, you can put it on under something. Obviously, it's with prosthetics, and you get the impression of a six-pack and great big pecs.
So on TV that would really work.
Well,
very well.
yes and no. I say it's very old. This is from the early 2000s, from a sketch show we did, and someone wore it under I think a Superman costume, just to give them the impression of rippling abs. So there are so many jobs where you will need, you know, high vis, as plain as it is, but they're so needed. Whether it's medics, you got from your ambulance staff, paramedics, or your kind of stewards at events, and different uniforms. We've got some American prison warden shirts. Orange is the new black for the sickly impatient. Oh, matron!
Surprise! 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 How fun is this? I mean, we couldn't resist. Well, I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose in a way, is that how things started for you? Like dressing up? Did that give you your excitement?
Yeah, I suppose so. As a child, I was always fascinated with dressing up and costume, and my grandmother was a bit of an avid sewer. I wouldn't say she was an expert, but she would have a go, and she used to make me capes and hats and accessories, and I think that planted the seed. And as I got slightly older, I began sketching and constantly drawing outfits and these fashion designs and costumes, not really knowing that it was something I'd want to go into, just pure fascination, just constantly drawing. I think my mother still has hundreds of sketchbooks of mine filled with these fantastical outfits. So yeah, that seed started quite young for me.
And were you encouraged at school?
I would say that I had some really good teachers throughout my life.
That's key, right?
But I do remember my first ever, like your careers advisor, who, when I said that I wanted to be in the creative industries and I was touching on fashion, I didn't really know that my job really existed at that point.
No.
I was just like, I want to be a
very
fashion
unusual.
designer.
Yeah.
And his advice was, oh, well, maybe aim a little bit lower. Maybe try and aim for something more reachable. And I just don't really agree with that way of thinking. If someone has a passion for something, chase it. You know, go after it. We should be surrounded by people that are encouraging us. Of course, there has to be a level of realism in what we're doing. But if you have a skill set, and then to be advised by potentially, I don't know if it's still a thing now, these are careers advisors. They don't know you. They don't know you and what you're capable of.
100%. They're wheeled in for a moment in time, so it's very unfair.
Yeah. So there was an art teacher who I believe is actually retiring this year. She's still at the school I was at, called Mrs. Smith, and she, I would say, is the best teacher and someone that has really helped me hone my skills over the years. And the first ever production I designed the costumes for was, I don't know, I was like 14 or 15, and I hadn't cut a pattern before. I hadn't made a dress properly. I just cut things out and sewed it together. And it was the textile teacher at that school, whose name was Mrs. Fowler, and she took me under her wing a little bit and said, this is horrendous. What are you doing? Let's teach you how to cut a pattern. So the first skirt I ever cut, I was making, what was the play? It was The Importance of Being Earnest.
Oh, yes.
And Lady Doodah, that has the handbag moment, I was making the outfit for her. And I'd cut this skirt, almost like a Barbie skirt, almost like a triangle. But that's not how it sits on a body. Okay, well then how do we get to where we want to go? How do we create this? How do we start forming patterns? How's that going to fit the body? Is this shoulder too big on you? It just makes you start asking the right questions.
So you were quite lucky to that 14, 15 age group. You were sort of getting into your groove.
And yeah, it was there. I wanted to be doing something with the creative industry, as that was going to be the way I was heading. And then once I'd finished at kind of secondary school and I'd done my A-levels, within the arts, you were encouraged to go onto a foundation course, to go and find yourself, find your art.
Yes.
And so I did, and luckily went with a good group of friends.
Where did you go?
It was, at the time, it was called CIAD, which was Kent Institution of something or other, but now it's called the University of the Creative Arts, I believe. And that was interesting. I wouldn't say I found myself or anything in that, but what I did discover is I wasn't ready to go into the fashion world, because I'd done this foundation degree, majored in fashion, and thought, oh, I don't think this world's really for me. This doesn't sit well. I just didn't vibe. My final installation that I did was puppets, these great big giant puppets. And it did very well, and it's very well received, but it was more like an art installation. And it kind of was that, yet again, a crossover of fashion meets costume, meets puppetry. And I thought, this doesn't feel right. So I took a gap year, and it was on that gap year that I went travelling, came back, and I had a place at St Martin's to go and do fashion, but obviously my gut wasn't in it, you know, that gut feeling that we spoke about before, when your gut isn't there. So ironically, one day my friend Natalie called me and said, oh, I've got a friend at the BBC who wants someone to come on board in the art department to do some work experience. She went, I don't want to do it, but would you? And I was like, oh, I hadn't really even considered that as a career option, being in working in TV. And so I said yes, of course. It was 6 weeks working at the BBC Television Centre in Shepherd's Bush, which at the time was the hub of kind of...
What a job.
Yeah, it was I will never forget it, because you would walk into the BBC and then you had what they called the donut, which were where all the studios were.
Yes. And
you could walk around there, and one studio would have Dolly Parton. There would be Graham Norton in this one. You know, it was a real hub of activity. Back in the day at BBC Television Centre, everyone was in-house. So they'd have in-house costume designers, in-house makeup artists, in-house production designers, in-house set dressers, and everything was there. So you could be like, oh, I need some wigs, you go down to the wig store. Oh, I need some costumes, you go to the costume store. You need props, you go to the props department. And it was a magical place. But it was, at that point, just as I joined, it was just then the BBC was starting to sell off everything and kind of send everything out into the world. So I was really lucky to see that time. Yeah. And so I did my 6 weeks, and it was the art director of that show that said to me, well, what are you doing now? Well, you could come and train here. Come work with us, come work here. And so I did. I mean, I checked in with my parents at the time, and I think my dad was quite keen for me to go and get a degree, because no one else in our family at the time had got a degree. So it could have been a real thing if me and my cousin had both gone off and got degrees. And it was a real moment in the family. And
that's a very important thing to bring up, actually, because a lot of people do have that peer pressure or family pressure that they were expected to step up to the next generation.
If I think of my parents, both of them were very supportive of anything I chose to do, which is lovely. I always say, if I told them I was going to join the circus, they would have bought me my first pair of clown shoes. And they may never have understood where I was going or my kind of direction, but they would always support it. We were a very working class family, and my dad was always very striving to get the next best thing. He fought his way into becoming a stockbroker from being a market stall tradesman. He had this real story of progression, and I think he wanted that for me, and couldn't necessarily see it at the time in what I was doing. And my mum was the one to say, no, this sounds amazing, like don't throw a gift horse in the mouth. So is that the right?
Yes, it is. Having that full support, you went off trotting
to
the BBC.
And I mean, we didn't really have much money, and I wasn't being paid initially. And I think in the end, once I was on the kind of apprenticeship, it was kind of like £300 a month, something like that, to kind of cover your expenses and get you through. And so I worked in a bar Friday, Saturday and Sunday night. So I was working 7 days a week to try and get through this and kind of train and learn as much as I can and really kind of throw myself in the deep end.
And commuting from Kent
to London,
yeah,
so I grew up in Kent. So initially for the majority of that first year I was commuting to West London, so up on the train, and it was hellish. Not something I would want to commit to long time.
So
long term.
An idea, what time are you getting up and getting there?
Really, if you're shooting, call times are anywhere between 6 a.m, 7 a.m.
Okay.
So I might need to leave Sittingbourne at say 5 a.m. to get there, and that was when you're young and full of vitality.
Oh, you're so old now.
You're full of spring.
But yes,
But you know, it was a fun time. But I think I worked very hard, very aware that to kind of prove myself in every way, whether it to be my parents, whether it to be to the people I was working for and that were training me to do a good job. And I think I put quite a lot of pressure on myself to do well. Like the voice in my head is always going to be my worst critic. Like, you can do better, work harder, go faster. And it paid. For me, it paid off. That worked out really well because I discovered a career that I never would have known about otherwise. It's by someone swinging open a door and me walking through. It was like, wow, there's this whole world here that I actually fit quite well into.
Yeah.
Howdy, partner.
Howdy. Well, what are you doing here, a nice young, fine young man?
Just living my fantasy a little bit in a fur jacket.
I suppose that's a little bit about. I'm going to take this one off.
I might join you.
There is a fantasy element to this, isn't it? It's incredibly fun, very jolly sort of career.
Yeah, I mean, it's a costume window. It's very wide. You know, you can. There's drama. There's advertising, commercials, sketch shows, comedy, fashion styling, celebrity styling. The window is very, very wide, so you can find your niche. And for me, I've kind of fallen into the kind of commercial side of things, advertising, comedy. So my career has pretty much been built up of working on sort of comedy sketch shows and commercials, advertising campaigns, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And that works really well for me. I love the diversity of it and the fact that no two jobs are ever the same.
I can't ever be.
And I started at the BBC once I'd trained, my grounding was in kids telly there. And I remember one of the first ever jobs, I was the art runner, so the art/costume runner on a kids show called Trapped. And it was the first series of this game show for kids set in this tower, all a bit gothic, great fun. And they had this game where the kids had to box dragon eggs, which were just chicken eggs that we painted in these multiple colours, but on this conveyor belt, like working in a factory. Well, guess who was in the conveyor belt working it? Me. So there's me in a conveyor belt passing out these eggs onto the belt as these kids are trying to box them and smashing them as old egg is flying back into this. Yeah, I've never forgotten it, but it was fun.
Good fun.
Yeah, getting covered in egg. But yeah, and that was the starting point, and being there for a couple of years, working on a variety of shows, predominantly kids shows, but there was always so much going on around you. As I said to you, there were studios, you'd walk past Westlife, or as a Dolly Parton, or Cilla Black would wander, you know, all these different characters would just be there, and that was...
Surprise!
Yeah, very much so, yeah. A little shock. It was very fun. And then once I kind of finished there, it was up to me to go out on my own and start freelancing. With the BBC, I'd covered all these departments. My heart was in costume, so that's where I went, and it was within a short period of time I started to build up my own clients and contacts and became a limited company and started, you know, offering my services as a costume designer and stylist for these TV shows, campaigns, commercials, etc.
Gosh, so how long are we talking about from then till now?
Maybe about 16 years ago.
And did you find the leap going out fully on your own rather than as an assistant daunting or exhilarating?
Oh, exhilarating. I was desperate to... I suppose maybe that comes a little bit being an only child as well, having your own vision and always being encouraged to kind of share it and use it. I was really excited to put my view out there. These marvellous designers that I work with do incredible jobs, and I'm still friends with a lot of them now. But I also wanted to get a piece of the pie, so to speak.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's a natural progression
completely.
wherever your career is. So making costume and stuff, is that something you've continued to do from when you were at school, or do you get other people to make them for you? Or
it's a mix of all of those things, really, and every job has a different budget. For example, we did a commercial last year for UK TV with these giant fruits and vegetables. We had to have these custom-made mascot costumes that I designed that were all kind of a sassy carrot and this kind of drunk sweet corn in a rather fab velour tracksuit and strawberry. So those things were kind of custom make. There's other jobs that we'll do where they say, gosh, we need a spaceman or 2 aliens, can you knock it together? And we'll work in the studio, me and my team, and pull together these looks ourselves. Or it might be that I'll need to do some alterations. If we want to shoot with someone, we're tailoring jackets or trousers. I can do that, that's fine. And that's part of the fun of the job. It's you have to be versatile. It's bouncing off of these different jobs.
It just sounds like the most amazing job ever. What are the sort of downsides to it for you?
I suppose long hours. They are, you know, whether you're prepping or whether you're shooting, it's long days and it's usually very demanding. But at the same time, it can be very rewarding. So that kind of weighs each other out. I suppose there's a level of unpredictability to the work. Touch wood, I've been very lucky to have a steady flow. Coronavirus affected kind of the TV and film industry and freelance in general massively because there wasn't a huge amount of support there. So we all had to find our way throughout that, and that is just a kind of example of how quickly things can change. When the strikes happened in Hollywood with the actor strikes, a lot of people over here were out of work for months because their kind of main income was cut off. These productions came to a halt and said, no, thank you, we don't need you for now, just sit tight, look after yourself. So there's that. I suppose that's something that is possibly quite scary, especially to someone new coming into the industry, to have that kind of fear. I remember having it. When's it? You know, this job's coming to an end. Like in a week's time, I finish this job. What's next? But I think with time and a bit of experience, you realise that they do come. They're a bit like buses. You know, they can come at once, and you can't do it. You can't. You have to turn some down. But I think it's having faith in your ability and knowing your own worth.
Yes.
Because there can be that kind of nature of trying to be, it's like people undercut you, or perhaps having to state your own rates with people, discussing budgets, discussing the rates of your team, and knowing what your worth is.
Yeah. So are you sort of pitched against another stylist?
Oh gosh, yeah. Usually productions would be quite frank about that. So we're approaching a few stylists, a few designers. Could you pitch an idea? Right. Could you sketch some ideas or mood board some ideas for this script or this visual we're trying to do? And then sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, and that's the nature of life. So you do have to become a little bit hardened to the fact that sometimes it's going to be a no, but that's a story of life.
You look like you're in a boy band.
Yeah, sequin mode. Well, these are from, I think I used both of these in the Harry Styles video that I did.
Oh, really?
Treat People with Kindness. I did all the dances and background for that, and I think these were used on some of them. So
yeah, do we look good?
Yeah. Twinkle.
One of the things you have done to share is you created a book, didn't you?
Yes, that was a pandemic thing. So during the pandemic, I thought, well, I get a lot of emails from people keen to get into the industry, or assistants that work for me will say, gosh, how do we do this? How do I get here? How do I make contact with the designers? And so instead of kind of having to reply to everyone individually, I thought, well, let's put it into a book. So over a couple of months during the pandemic, I compiled, I think there's about 30 chapters in this little ebook, just touching on the different ideas and the different questions that I know I had when I was starting out, to give some people some answers and insight into how I did things, how I think you can do things, and options you have, and just to help, really. It's just a way of giving people more information, because sometimes people can gatekeep their kind of ways in, or means, or even what they're earning. I think it's really good to talk about what you earn with your...
So you're on an even playing field.
Especially with your fellow colleagues, to make sure no one's being kind of underpaid, or everyone's being fair.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the idea with the book, and it's been really well received, which is really nice.
It's good, because that's in part what the Pearl of Wisdom Conversations is sharing, imparting, empowering, so that because we're all in this together.
Yeah.
There is more strings to your bow, aren't there, than just styling. I think there's a little photography as well.
Well, I think that any creative, you get the same as you. We all love to dabble into different areas, and it's all part of being a creative person.
Yeah.
I think you find yourself trying different things, doing different things, and a second love of mine is photography. We've done some shoots together before. Yeah. And makeup.
It's very good.
But it's always nice to be able to add other elements to your cauldron, so to speak.
Do you think as well, that's because going self-employed can be quite scary for somebody, right? Yeah. They're not sure that it's actually going to work. But I've found being self-employed is being empowering, like you were just sharing now, that it actually then opens up more options to you.
Well, like anything, there's pros and cons to both sides of it. I can see if someone's worked in a corporate position with this guaranteed money coming in every month,
sick pay,
a
holiday
pension,
pay,
all those things. That's a real safety net, and I can see why that is desirable, because that's a lot of those things we don't get as freelancers or limited companies or self-employed, whatever you want to label it as. But I can only imagine it must be very difficult to step out of that safety net and be like, well, what happens? What if the work doesn't come? And I suppose there has to be a point where if your career is taking you that way, if you want to be freelance and you want to be self-employed and be your own boss, you have to make that jump and have that faith in yourself and your abilities that you will make it work.
Yes.
It's that can-do attitude.
And you still can get the financial rewards from it. I mean, look at us in sequins. I mean, what else would you want in life?
Made it.
I made it.
But that is the fun of it. I couldn't work any other way now. I feel like even with your free time, you have a certain power over how you choose to plan your week and your days. Obviously, it's sometimes controlled by the job you're on.
The only thing I still retain from my corporate days is the weekend. Like when you're going to meet up with friends, it's on a Sunday lunch.
Or TGI Friday. It's Friday, thank God. Yeah, but I think we can all feel that, because we do associate weekends to being free, having time off. Yeah. And as you say, it's the most common time when people are available, so you book things in for those days, so you're excited about it.
Yeah, indeed. Well, darling, thank you so much for your
very
time.
Welcome.
We've touched on a few things. We've tried on a few things. There's one more that I just might like to...
Just call me Debbie Reynolds, darling. Good morning, good morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Isn't it amazing what a costume can make you do, make you feel? And I've had a fabulous time with our Patrick Jack. I hope you have too. I'm going to put all the links below so you can follow him. And thank you very much for joining. Toodle pip.